What's up, everyone? It's Riley, and today we're going to do something a little bit new. Alrighty, so I read a lot of comics, and typically I read a bunch of new issues every week. During non-pandemic times, would read maybe about 40 new issues per week from stuff from Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, etc. And recently I fell really far behind. I was about a whole month behind, and there are less issues every week right now, so a month worth wound up being something around 100 issues. So in the past couple days, I decided, you know what, I need to get caught up. So I read about 100 back issues from the past month, and then I read another almost 30 issues from this past week. And after getting caught up, I was like, okay, now I can finally do something that I've been wanting to do for a little while, and that is doing these weekly review videos of new issues. Now, I'm not going to sit here and talk about every issue, because talking about 30 issues worth of new comics, I'd be sitting here for hours, and I don't think anyone wants to see that. But I'm choosing some highlighted issues to talk about. And what issues I'm going to highlight, basically every week I'm going to, from the stuff that I read, I'm going to talk about new issue ones, one-shots, events, final issues, stuff like that. Just anything that seems like something that I should be talking about. Or if it was an issue that I was like, oh wow, that just blew me away, then I'll talk about that. So I've got a handful of issues to talk about this week from all the different publishers, and yeah, there was some pretty decent stuff that came out, so I'm excited to do this. It's something that I want to do every Thursday, and on top of giving me a new video to put out every week, and keep me on schedule and stuff, it's a way for me to kind of keep myself in line and keep myself in check as far as not falling behind on my reading, because it's something that if I'm supposed to put out this video, then I need to do that reading. So anyway, before we get started on the reviews, I wanted to, as always, do a quick shout out for my Patreon page. If you like what I do on this channel and want to support me and help me make this content even better, then there is a link down below you can click on to be taken to my Patreon. You can support me on there. Anything helps in making this channel the best that it can be. And you'll get access to some extra content over there. There's, content showing my notes on what I do on my videos and behind the scenes footage, stuff like that. There's also going to be exclusive video footage over there, videos that don't make it on my YouTube. And then also I'm going to be doing monthly live streams just to hang out with my Patreon subscribers and stuff. So if you want to become part of the Patreon family, click the link down below. And then also, as always, I have to give a shout out to my other channel. Every week we do multiple videos over at the Omnibus Collectors Network. I'm joined by multiple awesome YouTubers, and we talk about all kinds of stuff: comics, manga, movies, television, video games. So if you enjoy what I do here, definitely check me out over there. There's a lot of awesome people that are involved in that channel. So yeah, go give them a subscribe, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel here. Anyway, let's get started. So we're going to start with some DC things. There's a few issues that I wanted to talk about from DC. First, DC's been doing their current line-wide event, the Death Metal event. It's Scott Snyder's kind of final work, his encore, as he's been saying, for his run on the DC Universe. Everything that started from his Batman, going into his Justice League and the Metal event, and then now it's all coming to a head in Death Metal. So if you are familiar with Metal, then you know basically there was a dark multiverse that we got introduced to, and in the dark multiverse there were all these dark versions, all these kind of amalgamations of Batman with other characters. So we had, Batman with Cyborg, with Flash, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Doomsday, and then the big villain, the one that kind of made the most impression on people, wound up being the Batman Who Laughs, which is a Batman-Joker amalgamation. And now we're here in Death Metal, and we get introduced to even more various Batmen. And the primary villain here is this, and we're going to get into a little bit of spoilers for the first couple issues, is this version of the Batman Who Laughs that's taken even further and is fused with, essentially, for lack of better terms, Dr. Manhattan, or the there's a Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen amalgam with Batman called Batmanhattan. And they take Batmanhattan and they fuse that character with the Batman Who Laughs, and he becomes the Darkest Knight. Now, I am not a fan of what they've been trying to do with integrating the Watchmen into the DC universe. Was not a fan of Doomsday Clock. I thought it was just a load of crap. But unfortunately, that stuff is playing a part in death metal. So luckily, if you don't want to read that stuff, if you're also not a fan of those ideas, you don't have to read Doomsday Clock, because this single issue, that I'm going to be talking about here, Dark Knights, Death Metal, Legends of the Dark Knights, gives you the whole backstory of this new Batmanhattan and the Darkest Knight and all that stuff. So you don't have to deal with all the other crap. It gives you all of that laid out right here. And that takes up about half of this issue, which is kind of an anthology issue full of short stories. So that main feature, written by Scott Snyder with James Tynion IV, just gives you all the background you would need on that character. So it's very helpful, and it's actually really illuminating on stuff that it does give material that we can see from other stories, but it also, as well as working as a refresher on giving you all those plot points from other series, it gives you some new material that you haven't seen elsewhere. So I think this issue is worth it, definitely, to see that material. If you're wanting to keep up with the death metal event, this issue makes it a lot more palatable to understand what's going on with this new version of this villain. It also, like I said, has a bunch of other short stories by writers like Garth Ennis and Marguerite Bennett and Peter Tomasi, where we're introduced to other new Bat characters. We get a Batman T-Rex hybrid. We have Batman, who is literally a living version of Gotham City. And then we have this new version where a young Bruce Wayne becomes the King of Robins, and he's this crazed young psychopathic version of Bruce Wayne. That was probably the best story of this issue. So yeah, if you're reading death metal, check out this issue. It will illuminate a little bit on the main villain. It's definitely worthwhile to check it out, and I think it's worthwhile for that King of Robins story, honestly. Anyway, next from DC, we have the first issue of a new Sandman Universe series, The Dreaming Waking Hours by G. Willow Wilson. I was very excited to see this one because G. Willow Wilson is a fantastic writer. She's probably best known for her work on Miss Marvel over at Marvel. She came over to DC and she was writing Wonder Woman very briefly, and I was excited for her to write Wonder Woman because I was like, oh man, this is such a great match for her. And then she left, and I was upset, but I found out that it was because of this series. So I was like, okay, let's see what happens with this one, and if it's worthwhile, then I won't be so upset. So this series is replacing the previous Dreaming series that was part of the Sandman Universe line. And G. Willow Wilson comes in and tells us this new story that honestly is great for new readers. So if you're not familiar with Sandman, you're not familiar with The Dreaming or any of those line of books, you can hop in on this and enjoy it without any previous context. It does make reference to that other stuff, so you might wind up wanting to go back and read that stuff, but don't worry, you don't have to. But she introduces a new character, and it is a fantastic first issue that sets up for something that I hope is going to be a really great story. But yeah, this is one of the highlights for this week as far as new material goes. I absolutely loved this issue, and I highly recommend it. If you're a fan of the Sandman universe, definitely read this issue. Even if you're not, this is just good comics. It is a fantastic story, and I don't want to give away much as far as the plot goes, because I went into it not knowing anything, and I feel like that kind of helped in me having the reaction that I did. So check it out. I really liked it. I hope you will too. And then the last piece from DC is Injustice Year Zero, issues 1 through 3. Those first 3 issues all dropped at the same time. This is really notable because it's Tom Taylor coming back to the Injustice franchise. Taylor wrote the first 2 or 3 years of the Injustice series, and then he came back, I think, for the Ground Zero series, and now he's back for Year Zero, which he was teasing on his Instagram for a while. And everyone pretty much knew he was returning to Injustice, but we didn't know if it was going to be Injustice 3 or what it was going to be. And it is Injustice Year Zero, which takes us back to the material before his first Injustice comic. And not only does it go back to right before the Injustice comics start, but it also gives us a look back at World War II and the Injustice Universe's version of the JSA. So these first issues are just a bunch of kind of exposition, but it shows you that there's definitely going to be some things that are different about this version of the JSA, and it's kind of setting up some differences with the Joker as well. So it's giving us something interesting to latch onto that I'm enjoying. It's not a lot substantial just yet, which I believe is why they probably dropped 3 issues at once, but it's something that is enjoyable, and if you're a fan of the Injustice universe, then you're definitely going to want to check this out. So I'm excited to read this going forward and see what differences they're going to make to the JSA and what differences are going to happen with this version of how World War II played out, and how that kind of changes the DC universe going forward. Okay, so that's everything for DC. Over at Marvel, I wanted to talk about Empire and the Empire event because the 4th issue came out this week, but it's proving kind of hard for me. Typically with Marvel events, I'm very well versed on things that have happened at Marvel for the entirety of the publisher's existence. But with this event, I feel like writers Al Ewing and Dan Slott are really honing in on a blind spot in my Marvel knowledge, because it talks about a lot of those classic Avengers events that I haven't read, like the Kree Skrull War and the Celestial Madonna saga. And those are the things that are really, I think, playing a big part into this event. So I'm finding a hard time really comprehending everything that's going on, because they're using a lot of concepts and characters that I'm not that familiar with. So I think what I'm going to do is read that entire event. After it's done, I'm going to go back and do a complete reread, and then maybe do a video where I talk about Empire itself. So I can talk about whether or not it might be worthwhile to read that event. But yeah, suffice to say, as of now, I don't have the best voice to talk about that event. So we'll talk about that one later. But the only other Marvel thing that I wanted to talk about is something that was really awesome, a fantastic issue. And that was the Giant Size X-Men Phantom X issue. So this is the latest in the line of Giant Size X-Men one-shots, this one focusing on, of course, the character Phantom X. And I am a big fan of Phantom X. One big part of that being because he originated from my favorite writer in comics, Grant Morrison, and his run on X-Men, which is one of my favorite X-Men runs, the new X-Men, as part of Morrison's expanded look at the Weapon Plus program. So in New X-Men, we're introduced to Phantom X as well as these other Weapon Plus things like the World and Ultimatum, and even stuff like the Stepford Cuckoos and stuff like that. And he expanded a lot on Weapon Plus, which is basically supposed to be the program that Wolverine came from. And I absolutely loved what he did there, and I absolutely love when other creators start to expand on it as well. So I love whenever in Jason Aaron's run on Wolverine, he does a little bit of expansion on that. And then in Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force, we have Phantom X as a part of that team. And Remender really expands again on the Weapon Plus stuff and revisiting the world and all that kind of stuff. And so here we are again with Jonathan Hickman writing this issue, and he starts expanding again on those same concepts that Morrison was using and introducing back in New X-Men. And it's just really, really awesome and really well done. I know I'm biased because I'm a big Phantom X fan, I'm a big New X-Men fan, and this is probably not going to do it for anyone who's either not a fan or especially people who haven't read that material. But if you have, if you're in the same boat as me, this is a great issue. And I usually don't do this, but I finished this issue and immediately went back and reread it again, and then went back and reread pieces of the issue multiple times because there was so much to digest here. Just giving us these revelations about the character of Phantom X and about other characters that are closely tied to him and about the world and stuff like that. And it leaves us on this cliffhanger, which I was like, I'm so upset that I have to wait to see what happens next. But I think it's going to be tying into another one of those Giant Size X-Men one-shots that's coming up soon. But yeah, if you're a fan of Phantom X, this is definitely one of the highlights of this week's new issues. Alright, so Marvel and DC is done. There was one issue from Dark Horse that I wanted to comment on. I don't have a lot of commentary on this. This was the Alien original screenplay adaptation. So they already did this. Dark Horse did an adaptation, a comic adaptation of the screenplay for Alien 3, which was a fun little miniseries. And they're doing it again with this one, adapting the original screenplay for the original Alien movie. But this is so different from the final product of the Alien movie that I really don't know how to judge it, I feel like, until I see the whole thing, until I read the entire miniseries. So much like with Empire, I think with this one I'm gonna have to read the whole thing and then come back and talk about it as a singular story, because it is so different from what we got in the Alien movie. The characters, the alien, the settings and stuff, everything is very different. So I'm excited to see how it plays out and stuff. It's kind of reminding me of back when Dark Horse did the Star Wars, where they did a comic adaptation of the original screenplay for Star Wars, and it was so different. It was something that was really fun to see, and just how those stories and how those characters differentiated originally from what they wound up being. And I think this is going to be kind of the same thing. So in a few months, I'll come back and talk about how this miniseries was as a whole. But for as for now, if you're a fan of the Alien stuff, I'd say it's probably worth checking out just to see this kind of historical piece of Alien stuff. And this is probably the last Alien comic, or one of the last Alien comics that Dark Horse is going to be able to publish, because the publishing rights to the Aliens comics have been transferred over to Marvel, which is part of the whole Disney Fox deal. So I'm sure Marvel's going to wind up republishing a lot of the old Dark Horse stuff in their own like Epic collections and stuff like that. But until then, this is probably going to be one of their last pieces that Dark Horse gets to publish. And then there was a few books over at Image. So I was excited to talk about the last issue of Sex Criminals. And Sex Criminals is a ridiculous, fun series from Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky that I've been loving since the very first issue hit. But then I realized that issue 30 is not the last issue, that they're actually coming back with issue 69, which is going to be like an epilogue type thing, because of course they were going to make the epilogue issue 69. So I think I'll come back and give more full thoughts on that once the final issue comes out. But this series is ridiculous, and I feel like this really warrants a complete reread before I can really give great and solid thoughts on it. So I think after that final issue comes out, once they do the last of the hardcover editions, I'll probably give it a prompt read through and then come back and do a review on Sex Criminals as a whole. But it is a really great and really just ridiculous title. So I'm excited to eventually reread it as a whole single story. Also from Image was the latest issue of Ice Cream Man. Nothing entirely special about this issue or anything, but it is an anthology horror series, so I could pretty much talk about every single issue, and a new reader could jump in at any point on this series. But Ice Cream Man is a series I absolutely love and does not get enough attention. It's basically kind of like a Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt, where we have this one character, like the Crypt Keeper, who is telling all of these, he's framing all of these different stories, all these horror stories. And in this series, it's the titular Ice Cream Man. He's this weird, monstrous, demonic ice cream man that in the series, we get little hints at what he is and who he is, but mostly he's just framing these stories. And so in the latest issue, we're given this look at who he is, kind of. We get to see him reading these bedtime stories, these horrific bedtime stories to his children. And it's these plays on stuff like Goodnight Moon and this real like bastardized version of Green Eggs and Ham. And it's just really ridiculously fun but horrific stuff. So I love this series, and I wanted to shout it out because I don't think enough people read it. I think there's like 3 or 4 paperbacks already out, so if it sounds enticing to you, definitely pick the series up. If you like stuff like Tales from the Crypt, you will definitely like this. And every issue is a different concept, and oftentimes the creators try to do new and inventive things. For instance, there was a palindrome issue, so you can read it from front to back and then read it again from back to front, and it tells a story that kind of mirrors itself. So there's a lot of really cool things like that. And every once in a while we get a little bit of a peek at who the Ice Cream Man is, and those issues are also really cool. So anyway, awesome horror stories in that series. So if you're a horror fan, definitely pick up Ice Cream Man. And then finally, and probably the best book that I read from this week's new stuff, was the new graphic novel from Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and that is Pulp. I don't want to give a lot of information about this because I went into this pretty blind, and it gave me a lot of joy to, I don't want to say joy, it gave me a lot to think about. It really moved me. But it's something that I'll say is really poignant right now as far as the content goes. And it was not at all what I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be a Western story because of the cover, but it's more of a crime story, I think, set in the 20s. It's really fantastic. If you like crime comics, and if you enjoy especially Brubaker and Phillips and their stuff on like criminal, this is definitely worthwhile in reading. It's only about 70 pages, so it's not that long of a read, but it is a great story. I'd say this week the 3 highlights were Pulp, the Phantom X one-shot, and The Witching Hour, and then always Ice Cream Man is always a great series. But yeah, so those are my 3 top issues for this week. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this one. I plan on doing this every week. Like I said, it's going to keep me up to date on my weekly reading, but I'll choose different issues to talk about every week. Tell me down below what issues you read this week. What was the best thing that you read this week? Did you agree on my takes on some of these, or did you disagree with me? And if you're enjoying this, if you like what I'm doing here, let me know. I just want to know and make sure that I'm not doing this for nothing. But yeah, anyway, this is just the first of a series that I'll be doing every Thursday. Basically, I'll read the new issues Wednesday night, Thursday morning and stuff, and then I'll release a video sometime on Thursday talking about those new issues. So yeah, if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with all the new videos like this one and the other stuff that I do every week. If you liked it, give it a like, comment down below with your thoughts on the video. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.